Hello everyone, we are back for our next skills development session for ITT mentoring at ARU. I'm Jenny Fogarty, the Director of Initial Teacher Training, and today we're going to be thinking about managing conflict and how we as mentors reduce the impact of disagreement. So let's start, as we always do, by thinking about how we define conflict, particularly in our context. So we know that it's an active disagreement between two parties. It's something where they cannot get along, they cannot agree on an outcome, a decision, a process, and that results in a collision, where a situation in which beliefs, needs, or the facts of something are very different and cannot easily exist together, or both can't be true. So when we think about that in our context, what is it that trainees might disagree with us as mentors about? What is the conflict in the context of the mentor and trainee relationship? Because it's a very different type of conflict than you might be imagining. It's not a violent conflict, or at least it shouldn't be, but it's often a very personal conflict, which may result in some behaviours from our trainees that we would like to address or reduce. So take a moment to pause now to think about what examples of conflict exist between a mentor and their trainee. It's always good to be prepared for these kinds of conflicts, although sometimes they can take you by surprise. But having done this thinking in advance, we can help build up your skills in this area. If you think back to your first skills development session on feedback, we talked a lot then about why trainees might not be receptive to your feedback. So feedback is a really important cause of conflict, and it happens all the time. There can also be disagreements about tasks, your expectations of trainees and the tasks they're doing, and their expectations of the tasks they think they should be doing. The outcomes of those tasks, what it is that the doing of those tasks results in, either for them as the trainee or for the children and young people that they're teaching. Quality. Mismatch of expectations around quality is a big one for us as mentors, particularly when we're working with undergraduate students who are on a 3-year journey to training to teach. And then resources, including human resources, so how other people are utilised in the classroom, whether trainees are prepared, whether they've got everything they need. Thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead around resources can sometimes result in conflict. And the number one thing that trainees disagree with their mentor about are their professional judgments. They just don't think you're right. Your assessment of the situation, of their evidence, of their planning, of the work that they've done might be one thing, and they think you are wrong. So disagreements about professional judgments link back to feedback, but can include tasks, outcomes, quality, resources, and you'll have thought of other things as well. It's important for us to return back to our first principles. That is, our relationship with our trainee or our mentee in this context underpin everything, but it's a careful balance that we're trying to manage every day between that trusting relationship, but also the power that we hold as mentors, the power as gatekeepers to the profession, the power to make or break their career. In fact, we know that's not a real power. The trainees themselves hold that power, but there's a perception by them that we are very powerful. You might need to think about how this relationship looks different if you're the lead mentor, but it's something to bear in mind as we progress through thinking about how we manage and resolve conflict. I also wanted to bring us back to our ARU values that underpin all the work that we do in this area. We talk about ambition, innovation, courage, community, integrity, and responsibility. But in real life, it's the behaviours that we need to demonstrate for these values that make them come to life. Managing conflict head-on is an important way that we can demonstrate courage, integrity, and take responsibility for the success of our programme at ARU. By ducking out of these conversations, sometimes we think we're being kind, but in fact, we're not being courageous and we're not stepping into that challenging space to resolve issues. It's definitely part of your job as a lead mentor, but also as an effective school mentor, it's not an optional extra. It's not something, however uncomfortable it might be, that we can shy away from. But the lead mentor and the school mentor can work together to resolve conflict, particularly when it feels like it's an area that has been discussed over and over again. I wanted to draw your attention to the work of Kim Scott and her book Radical Candor, American spelling there for you, where she talks about the idea of having most profound conversations with our teams where change and growth can occur, where we care personally and we challenge directly. So this kind of wishy-washy, unsaid, low-level rumbling conflict occurs when people don't feel confident enough to challenge directly and be specific, but also that they're not demonstrating that they care personally. If you're responding to a trainee about your own class, we know that you care personally about the outcomes for those young people in your care. And it's important that you demonstrate that when you're challenging your trainees and managing that conflict. And this framework might be something for you to refer back to, because your communication skills are your #1 tool to manage conflict. Remember, the great Brené Brown, who we're going to talk about on the next slide, told us early on, clear is kind. So as I said, Brené Brown talks a lot about these difficult conversations and managing conflict, and she talks about them in the context of having a rumble. Not like that, not the old PJ and Duncan song, but there's some language you can use to facilitate a rumble that I find very useful. The one I use most often is help me understand. Help me understand why you did this when I asked you to do that. Walk me through your thinking around this lesson plan. We've talked before about how you adapt for this particular group. I didn't see that today, so walk me through your thinking. Tell me why this doesn't fit or work for you. Tell me more about something. The story I make up is an interesting one, but I often use the language of, tell me the story of your time on placement. Tell me the story of your relationship with your mentor. So giving a space, lots of open-ended starters to your questioning to help facilitate that conversation. It's not about direct, combative, aggressive language. It's about opening up a conversation to help trainees understand where you're coming from. But also thinking about it in our context, it's really important to set the scene. Telling trainees, we're going to have a bit of a challenging conversation now, and that's why I'm here. Go and have a drink, go and pop to the loo, and when we get back, we're going to have a bit of a conversation that you might find difficult, but at the end of it, there's going to be a clear way forward. So you're setting the scene, you're not landing things very hard, very quickly. So for today's skills development infographic, you've got the 3 phases again, and you can work through them. I'm asking you to embrace what I call the productive discomfort, the idea that uncomfortable conversations produce something that is better in the end. If it's not better in the end, you've not managed that conflict well. You need to start by setting the scene and explaining to a trainee that a difficult conversation is going to happen and the outcomes that you're expecting. Set those expectations. Take time to manage the emotions, yours and the trainees. I'm here to have a difficult conversation with you today because I know you want to be the best teacher you can be. Then you're going to move into phase 2, which is breaking down that conflict, acknowledging the difference of opinion, identifying the specific issues, linking back to previous skills development work you've done. That might be around giving feedback, it might be around target setting, and helping the trainees move from the personal to the professional. Everything on placement feels incredibly personal. They're being very vulnerable, putting themselves out there with a group of children, expecting them to learn something. We've got to help them move into that professional space and take feedback in the way that it's intended, which is constructive. And then phase 3, you need to regroup and reconcile. Sometimes you're going to need to stop the conversation without having said everything that you were expecting, but you can go again. Follow up in writing. Best practice is to ask the trainee to go away, think about what you've said to them, and then send you an email with a summary of the action points and the takeaways. And always remember that well-being check-in. It should come at the end of any difficult conversation, but it should also be at the forefront of your mind at the beginning and during. If a trainee is really sobbing, you need to stop the conversation because they're not listening to anything you're saying. And sometimes that happens more often than you think, and our job is to manage those emotions and take a little bit back of the control in that space. So we've talked about conflict in fairly neutral terms, but sometimes it can cross a boundary. If you don't feel safe having a conversation with a trainee, it's already gone way past what we would expect of a trainee on our programs. If you raise your voice or swear, it's game over, and same for that trainee. These are professional conversations in a professional context, and we need to remember that. And sometimes emotions get the better of us. That's not the time to sit down and have a rumble. It's important to manage the risk to yourself and others. Consider the timing of these conversations, the place, the space. Can you take trainees off site? Can you go for a walk around the field and take some of the heat out of what's happened? Think about their body language. Are they being open to the conversations, or are they shutting you out? Their verbal language. Are they raising their voice? Are they interrupting you a lot? Any written evidence you might have. And remember, part 2 of the standards is our friends. Trainees, as we said before, need to learn how to move from the personal to the professional, and having difficult conversations is an important part of that. But there are some behaviours that are absolutely unacceptable at ARU, and we won't tolerate them. And as the mentor, we need to take your lead on that if you think trainees are not responding well to conflict. I'm going to finish with some FAQs here, but I also want to say that it's very rare to have conflicts with trainees that get really out of hand. Low level, ongoing disagreements about professional judgments and about expectations happen fairly regularly, but big things are very, very rare. So is conflict in the mentoring context ever acceptable? Yes, it is. It will arise, but the level and the extent of that conflict is on a spectrum, and we need to make sure that it's on the lighter end of that spectrum. What do I do if they cry? They will cry. They'll cry quite a lot while they're training, because it is a very emotional process, and some of you will remember that yourself. You need to have tissues with you. You need to take a minute. You need to let them regroup, and you need to ask them where those tears are coming from. Are they worried? Are they anxious? Are they tired? Are they scared? Do they feel embarrassed? Help them see that this is a normal part of the process, and that crying is okay too. But we need to think about if this is a repeated pattern of behaviour, if there's something deeper going on for the trainee that we need to signpost additional support to. Does every conflict need writing down? Yes, we should have a record of difficult conversations, and that should link to their training plan. What happens if it happens every time you meet? That's a problem if trainees aren't responding to feedback in an open way and they're disagreeing with you frequently. We need to be thinking about where the lead mentor needs to come in to support this, and then, if necessary, the course team back at ARU. What if we just don't get along? We're all professionals. We work with people all the time that we don't get along with, and you see trainees in different contexts and you see different sides of them. We can work through that together. If you hate conflict, that's where the lead mentor can support you, but it's going to be part of the conversation. So we need to find ways and support for you as a mentor to keep doing this and to get better at it, so that you're feeling more confident. A few references and further reading for you here. There's a video at the end. You might find that interesting. So that wraps up our skills development session on managing conflict. We'll be back with the next one in a few weeks' time. Thank you.